Super excited to have Chris Meso with us.
In the first 5 years of business, we were a distribution model for temporary heating, temporary cooling equipment. You always compete against somebody. I don't care what industry you're in, you're competing. Going back to that garage, I didn't know anything about anything. I was at 3M, so I was in a sales program, which was phenomenal for me of understanding. I was a manufacturer's rep for industrial controls. I'll actually prototype equipment, and if it doesn't work, you won't pay for it.
What capacity did you stay on the first sale? Were you still the CEO visionary, or were you more like engineering prototype?
More the president visionary, but that changed very quickly. Kevin, on a golfing trip up north here, and he looked at me and he said, "You're miserable." So he's the guy who said, "Hey, why don't you go and run another company, start another company?" I'm like, yeah, I could never work for a large company. That's impossible. I just didn't know how to put it into words, but it was terrible.
I look at having like a 9-to-5 working for a large corporation like way more scary. Like the fact that I could be fired on a Friday is way more scarier than like the latter.
This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises.
So I'm super excited for today. I want to introduce our guest today. Super excited to have Chris Meso with us. A little bit about Chris. So Mobile Air was the first company. Multi-state footprint, 28 years, straight out the garage. I love that.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that. I'm not even going to read this really cool intro because I want you to unpack it. But then sort of phase two of you is T-Rex Advisory Strategic Business Coaching. Great story coming out of that for 8 years. Chris, I'm excited to have you. I look up to you. I think you're a great friend, entrepreneur. So really excited to kind of unpack today because I think it's kind of a treat for people to kind of listen to what we're going to talk about. But, let's talk about that. I mean, to me, you are a pure entrepreneur with a pretty awesome story, but just take me back to like the garage days of starting Mobile Air.
Sure.
Sort of unpack that and kind of what your thought process was, during those times.
Sure. So, for one, Wes, back at you, I appreciate our friendship. And just, I'd love to be here with you, unpacking some of the history. Hopefully it makes sense for some people. To go back to the garage, sometimes I don't want to go there because I knew so little. And then knowing what I know today, understanding the level of risks, understanding the amount of roadblocks, understanding today the what it would mean on a personal sacrifice with relationships. If you were to put all that in front of me ahead of time, I would have paused a little bit. I'm like, is this worth the squeeze here? For me, it is. Everybody's got to make their own decisions. But going back to that garage, I didn't know anything about anything. All I really did know is that, I was at 3M, so I was in a sales program, which was phenomenal for me of understanding. I was a manufacturer's rep for industrial controls, and I did that for years. So knocking on doors and talking, making presentations was getting to be second nature. Took a while. And so getting into starting a company, it's you. And it's a very small footprint. It's literally inside of a garage in Berkeley. It's next to the animal clinic, a very small building. And they had a bathroom, a desk, and a roll-up door. And again, I didn't know anything about anything, and here I go.
How old were you when you did?
I was 28, and I literally used the phone book to start calling people. The phone book. It's a physical phone book.
The yellow pages?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
what I mean.
so you're at 3M,
Sometimes
like
you
what,
don't want to go back there.
right. Yeah, like what made you take that leap, right? Because like the 3M, or like you got this great sales program, you're feeling good. Like what took you out of that to kind of make that leap?
Yeah. So you're so good at this. So you and I are, I think, much alike. I could never imagine. I still cannot imagine. So I'll be 65 this year coming up. And at 28, I already could understand 100% in my gut, knew, just didn't know how to articulate it. I could never work for a large company. That's impossible. I just didn't know how to put it into words, but it was terrible. And being on my own was less scary than working for a large company.
It's interesting because I meet most of my ecosystems, like your ecosystem, like entrepreneurial folks, right?
Yep.
But then I have the other, like, they look at entrepreneurs like that's really scary, right? Like there's a lot of risk. I look at having like a 9 to 5 working for a large corporation like way more scary. Like the fact that I could be fired on a Friday is way more scarier than like the latter, right? So it's an interesting dynamic, like how our brains are wired. Well, I love talking to you because you've already shared your age, so we have a 20-year spread, right? So I always love talking to you because like right now I'm 44, and like sometimes I think I have it together, and I realize like I really don't have it together.
None of us do, Wes.
But like going back to those days, right? Like talk a little bit about Mobile Air, because I think it's a really unique business that you started. Like what prompted that, and just talk about, what it actually did, because I think it's a really interesting business model.
One of the first things that rolls through my head, Wes, is it taught me how to survive. It truly taught me how to survive. And here's what I mean by that, because this is flashing through my head. In the first 5 years of business, we were a distribution model for temporary heating, temporary cooling equipment. It's all commercial and industrial. At this time, it was just commercial, light commercial, not even industrial. And there was, you always compete against somebody. I don't care what industry you're in, you're competing. If you're not competing, you don't know your competitors yet. So you're you're really early on. So I found out who my competitors were. And these guys have been button heads for years. So they had probably a 20 and 30 year head start on me. And that's a lot. That's a lot of investment and a lot of shaking hands, a lot of knowing people in the industry, of which I did not have yet. And these guys were killing each other. So in the first 5 years, if I bought a piece of equipment, and if I say I made $2,000 on leasing a piece of equipment for a number of months, within that 5 years, that same piece of equipment did not go down in price for me to buy it as CapEx. It went up in price. At the same time that's gone up in price, the capture dollars to lease that equipment out fell by 50%. So if you put that on a graph, that's a race to the bottom. And that's where I was. So I'm at my kitchen table and I'm charting out my race to the bottom. And I just went back to, so we called on like Skanska or Barton Mallow or, a lot of these other, Wallbridge, larger general contractors in our area at that time. And I just went back to not everybody at all, but just some of the guys I knew. When I say knew, I mean like I know them, I trust them. Like you and I know and trust each other. So I could have a conversation that is, on a better level, deeper level, more true level of, hey, this is what I want to say. I'm not sharing with these guys I'm freaking out, but I am, because I know that I'm not going to survive. I am sharing with them that all the equipment that I own, that my competition owns, that the last engineering renovation, change, update, upgrade, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And the building, how we build buildings has changed. So what we're doing is we're locking in moisture. We're very inefficient on heating or cooling or drying or dehumidifying. And I just said to him, if you give me permission, I'll actually prototype equipment, and we'll, with your ideas, with my ideas, we'll work on equipment. I'll build it. I'll prototype it. We'll use it. And if it doesn't work, you won't pay for it. If it does work, this is what you owe me. And I'm not talking Taco Bells. I'm talking like we had projects at 911 switchgear rooms for AT&T. We had projects for DMC hospitals, Beaumont Hospital, for U of M, building, A-class buildings. But these guys, we had, like you and I have a bond of trust. We had some of these guys, a good bond of trust together. So I was able to prototype equipment, put it together, bring it to a job site and experiment, and they let me do that. Because of that, I became a prototype shop. Because of that, we had new designs in the industry that were they needed to happen. And I just happened to be the one at the right time. And then what really did happen is I became a niche manufacturer. I built 5 of those. Next year, I built 25. Next year, I built 100. And I just kept doing that for almost 30 years. And then what did happen because of that is I went from a half of what I used to make to 2 and 3 times. So I was way more expensive by 2 times at least than my competition. But the value that they got from using my equipment was that high that they did it. They actually wanted that equipment more than the cheaper equipment. So we dug moats. People talk about digging moats. That's my digging moats.
How long did that take, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned you started this at 28.
Yeah.
You have that, if you go back to that moat feeling where like, I've got this, right? And you're going 2 to 3x your competition.
Yeah.
What was that time frame that you can comfortably, was it 10 years, 5 years? Years?
It's more than 5. It was probably less than 10. It was not overnight. And it was, so we talk about entrepreneurs, and you talk about as an entrepreneur, just in your gut, where you need to go. You're just not there yet, but you actually understand you actually have to get here. That was in my gut. And it took capital that I didn't have. I actually started a rep firm to resell equipment so I could pay for the CapEx to keep prototyping and building. I mean, you talk about being a nut. I think I was full nut.
What helped you do that, right? So like if you're 28, and I want to evolve this conversation into, operating system, but like, did you just have this all as in your head as a vision, or did you start to write all this stuff down? Like, how did you get everybody around you bought into your craziness of this growth and scale?
Well, I had a partner, Mark, and he was also my brother-in-law, right? So small business. And I'll give Mark a lot of credit to, I did have a lot of ideas. Not all of them were, capable of being implemented, or even designed or built or even put into action. So he was a really good sounding board of keep thinking what you're thinking, right? And so that caused us to have lots of conversations to get it nailed down. But writing, Wes, I would take every Sunday afternoon for 20 some years, and I would be in the basement of my house. I'd be like a man room with a projector and stuff, but I would go down there and I'd just close the door, and I had a football game or basketball game in the background. But I would spend 2, 3, 4 hours by myself every Sunday, and I would look at all my notes from the past 3 months, just read them. And then I would look at what I did past couple weeks, and I'd read those notes. And then I would make notes of what I have to do this next week or 2 weeks. And I would just keep checking stuff off the list. It was so complicated, I just couldn't have it not in writing. All the ideas.
You know, was it 28 years you had this business?
Yeah. So I was 55.
56?
Yeah,
55?
55, 56. Yeah. So May I started, I was 28. It was May of 1989.
So walk through, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, I mean, people start their own business for various reasons, and then things usually evolve, right? Like my first company, I did it to make as much money as possible, and like then that evolved into like, hey, this is a real business, and there's these other dynamics going on, and I kind of like it. But obviously, there's so much to unpack in 28 years, right? There's probably we could probably do a podcast recording every day for the next year if we wanted to. But like, talk about at 55. Like, what takes you from building the Moat and all these things to like sell your company?
Yeah, that's another great question, Wes. So in Houston, well, in the South, like Houston and Florida, and this is probably what I'm going to say 2009, maybe it was 09. We had this, big hurricanes, and I was experimenting on a bunch of equipment that we were coming out. So this was like generation 5 or 6 of some of this heat equipment. And it would cost us at that time. I was not using the bank. We had paid off all our debts, and we were a cash flow company. And I had 7 figures in a personal account saved up to build this next generation of equipment. And I was going to cash it myself, and so was Mark. And so we needed to experiment on this stuff. So when I say experiment, I'm saying like I need like 100,000 square foot building or greater, and I need to flood this thing with water, and I need to just find out what happens if I dry it too quick. And no one's going to do that. But in a hurricane, Katie barred the door. I mean, it's in your face. So I loaded up a bunch of prototype equipment into a semi. I got a couple guys. We drove separately, and we went down to Houston. And I knocked on a couple doors for literally a day, and I got all the jobs I needed. Yeah, and I experimented on these buildings, and within about maybe 10 days, I was gone. I went back home because I had all the information that I needed for my tests. What I did learn is that very hard to get a hotel room in a hurricane. Didn't really figure that one out until we got down there. We were in the seediest part of town you could imagine. And I had a chair literally like against the door at night. I just figured, I don't even know where we are. It's terrible. But on TV, I'm listening to on the television, like talking about Lehman Brothers and Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. And I mean, all these entities that are just grenading. And at that point in time, that, those couple of days, I was convinced that I don't know money, and neither do these other buffoons. These are the guys who are smart, completely missed it, right? These are the money managers. These are investment bankers. These are the guys who were selling, collecting commissions, and everybody else is effed, right, around us. And that was not small. It was huge. And so that was a great financial crisis that was unfolding. We just didn't know it yet. So that's what got me to sell my business, Wes. I started to read incessantly, focused, maybe too focused, on macroeconomics and money flow. And so fast forward a couple of years later, in 2015, I got an investment banker because I was doing my own math, and I just thought my business is worth twice of what it would have been worth 5, 7 years prior. Nothing's changed except for interest rates and how we value purchasing businesses. And I got in front of a guy at Merrill Lynch. John Stewart is his name, and he was just a great guy for me to know. And I gave him all the things that were in my head, and he said, "You're pretty spot on. You've done a lot of research, so you're pretty close. It's not perfect, but you're pretty close." And I just went to my partner Mark and I said, "Hey man, we could graduate from high school all over again and do whatever we want to do in life, and we've just 2x'd our exit, and we had nothing to do with it except for being here." I said, "What do you want to do? Because I want to sell." And he said, "Yeah, well, let's go." And we actually sold that company to private equity, and I stayed for 3 exits.
3 additional exits, like private equity, resold, or
in total. So we sold again. On the second sale, I was gone. I just could not work with these guys.
What capacity did you stay on the first sale? Were you still the CEO visionary, or were you more like engineering prototype? Or
yeah, so more the president visionary, but that changed very quickly too. These guys come in, they're a new sheriff in town, and how you run a business, and I'm not saying this is bad or good, this is just how I think about it. As an entrepreneur, Wes, you and I are going to run a business the way we want to run a business. And we're not going to run it for a quarterly mark to sell it in 3 years. We are going to run a business as the way that in our minds we want to run that business, as a holistic entity. And it's not just peeling off dollars for additional EBITDA to get it to the next guy. It is such a different dynamic of running a company. I just couldn't do it. It didn't flow well for me mentally. I mean, this is a whole different rabbit hole here, but I stayed for a very short period of time, Wes. I just could not. But
yeah, go ahead.
Here's the nice part about the learning curve I was on, though. For one, you're learning how to be purchased. So what you learn in that process is nothing that you've ever been taught in business school. It is like it's a whole new world. And then after being bought, being on the other side, watching my biggest competitor that I competed against for almost 30 years. I mean, you talk about if you played a game of basketball and you were elbowing each other, pushing each other, blocking each other, pulling on each other's jersey, but you're doing it for 48 minutes. I'm doing this for 28 years. We hate each other. And to know that we were about the same size company and to understand how the lens that we're using, we just purchased him at 50% value of what we just purchased me for. So that's the difference of how you run a company, the value of a company, how people buy and sell companies. It's worth the understanding of how is valued.
How long did you prepare from like the day you were like, I'm going down this journey, till you actually sold? Are you talking 2-3 years or?
Way less than that, Wes. When I made the decision, it was probably too fast, to be honest with you. If I would have understood what I need to understand as a business owner, I would have understood that this is a journey to get to here. So I have to have the context of how long that journey probably should be. At least 3 years, if not long. Could be 20 years. Who cares? Make it 20. But the context is I have to know the length of the journey. It's not going to be perfect, but then I have to put it not in future tense. I have to put what I need to do in present tense and just start executing on a model over a period of time. Isn't that how you run a good business anyway?
Yeah, like
we don't do that.
Yeah, like how much did that, like as soon as that entered your ecosystem, right? Because I just have this vision of you and your Sundays, knocking out notes, kind of doing your thing. But now you introduce this whole new idea of now I'm going to sell. And I kind of have this emotion around once that enters your ecosystem, it's like there's no turning Chris around from this. Like this is happening, right? So
You've already run the light. Yeah, you're through. Yeah, you're gone.
yeah, like how much did this, like just to give people a sense of like, what did this do to you? Like how much did this actually consume of you during this process?
Yeah. So you and I both understand the output here. It is all consuming. Once you pull the trigger, it's like you're not partially pregnant, right? Or the gun, or the gun's kind of going off, right?
Yeah.
It's over. So the race has started, and once that does start, it is so consuming. It's consuming on every level in life you can imagine. It does take over.
So at the end of it, right, you sell the company and there's a sum of money.
Yep.
Did you think about like, so you're 55-ish, right?
Yep.
Did you think about that moment or like beyond the next year, 3 years, what your life looks like? Because I kind of put myself in your era, like Chris is this hard, fast, like go, 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 go. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we sold, like now what, right? Like what happens now when you're 55, you sell your company and you're Chris Meso at 55 on a Monday? Like what goes on?
So my attorney, so he is a Dickinson Wright guy. This is a small community. The Detroit area is big, but it's small. So, and I had known Kevin for a couple of decades and good friend of mine. And I hired him as my transition attorney because I knew he had a team and I knew that team sold businesses. And so they protected their client. And I knew I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's why I had my conversation with Kevin is, I don't know what I don't know. You are going to help protect me. You're going to teach me. And you're going to send me a bill and I'm going to pay it. And we're going to work together for, I don't even know, Kevin, 4 or 6 months. Kevin and I worked together for about 5 years. And he sent me a lot of bills. And I had a tremendous learning curve. Truly, I had a education in selling and buying. But to answer your question, it's, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who you're going to be when you leave. Kevin and I had conversations going, like I'm up north right now at our cottage. And we were going up north to this cottage to go golfing. Now, you and I have golfed together before, and I'm not the greatest golfer, but I just don't pay a lot of attention to it. Back in the day, I golfed a lot more, and that was a lot better stick. And I told Kevin, because he said, "What are you going to do with all your time?" And I just said, "Hey, Kev, I'll come up here for the summer times. I'll do a lot of golfing. I still belong to Red Run golf club, and I'll golf when I want to, hopefully a lot." And he laughed, and he goes, and he goes, "Good luck with that." And I thought, well, how pompous is that, right? And so that summer when we did sell, I golfed 3 days in a row at Red Run. If I ever told you the story. And I can't remember who I was, all that was in the foursome on the third day, but third day in a row. It was a beautiful day. It was stunning, week for golf. And we're coming down 16 and I had just, so we're coming up to our second shot. And I told the guy that I'm walking with, I said, "I'm going to quit." And he thought I was going to quit the round. He goes, "Well, I got a couple holes left." And I'm like, "No. I'm going to quit the club. I don't know how to live here. I don't. And if I stayed here, I'm just going to drink here every night. And if I do that, I'm going to get arrested driving somewhere." And I even told him, I said, "This is just not me. I don't understand what I don't understand, but what I do understand that this is not me here right now." And I quit that day.
Yeah, I do remember that story. It was a powerful story of just like decision making. So so then you kind of evolve into, so like you work with him for 6 months, you know, where was the drive for, because right now T-Rex Advisory, you're a business coach, which is amazing because I love, like, you've been through it. Like, you're 20 years, like the wisdom that you have and the experience is so valuable to any entrepreneur that's on your path, because you also have 4 kids and like you've gone through this journey, right? And I also think there's a lot of consultants out there. I don't want to like bash anybody, but I like people that have been through an experience to give their own experience, shared feedback, right? People that are like, hey, I'm not sure what the answer is, but here's what I did, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. And I think you and I have that same kind of delivery when we're talking to people, like, here's where I completely messed up. Like, talk a little bit about like how T-Rex Advisory came into your ecosystem, through that transition, right? Because it sounds like that's a pretty heavy time for you.
Yeah, it's a lost period. When you lose yourself in purpose, if you want to use a word, and when you lose yourself in purpose, what is your purpose of being? And what is it that makes you, fills your bucket with energy? I lost that. I didn't know you needed that. I had no idea. Kevin, again, on a golfing trip up north here towards the end of the summer, told me, we had just golfed all day with a bunch of buddies. We're on Burt Lake. We're drinking beers. We got the music cranked up. I mean, it was beautiful. And I'm like, this is how it should be. And he looked at me and he said, you're miserable. How would you know that? I mean, how would you know that? Because I didn't say that. And he was right. I was bored. I was bored to tears. So he's the guy who said, hey, why don't you go and run another company, start another company? I'm like, yeah, I know who I am. I will be 2 feet, both arms, the whole body. I'll be in the pool. I'll be underwater in the deep end, and I'll be fine there because that's where I would be. And I said, I don't want to do that again. So I don't know what to do. And he said, why don't you just then go back and talk to other entrepreneurs? Why don't you teach them what you did? And my feedback to Kevin was, I've never taught, I don't think, anything like that. So I wouldn't know how to do it. So that's a skill set that I wouldn't possess. And he said, well, I'm going to introduce you to a guy who ran EOS, Gino Wickman. And I worked with him for a number of years. It was a very positive experience for me. Great learning curve. Light in how I would need to have it presented to me. I would need more depth. And I found that with another group called Pinnacle. So, I mean, so these things are, thank God for me, for Kevin. You need a few good people in your life to really help you with your decision opportunities. And Kevin was that for me. So he's a guy who got me into strategic coaching.
Now, is it like, do you focus on, entrepreneurs that are looking to exit, or is it just being in that ecosystem? Like, do you gravitate towards that founder visionary, or is it the leadership team? Like, where do you sort of gravitate towards?
Sure. That's a great question. Again, when you're working with an entrepreneur, with another business owner, I think it's very personal. It really is. You're going to, not at first, but over time, you're going to get past the tools, past the concepts, past, sewing these tools together so you can actually run a better business. Once you get past some of that initial conversations, you're going to get into the more personal world with them. And so for me, having the ability to know what I had to do to survive, what I gave up in relationships, what I did really, really well, what I didn't do so well, because everybody does both. Some things well, some things not well. And having, I think, a clear understanding, trying to land that unemotionally at first. There's always emotion in there, but try to land that unemotionally so you can put it in context, and then go and have these great conversations with other leaders. We are having these same thoughts as individuals over periods of time in our life, with our wives, with our children, with our business partner, with how we compete, what's driving us. Most of these guys that I work with look like me. They got white hair, they're a little older, and they're just great people. They really are. And when you get down to it, if you get down to the humanness past the robotics of running a company, you get down to the humanness, you'll find that for me, I look for someone who is very honest. And I look for someone who can make good business decisions, typically. Someone who wants to be coachable and learn. Like, I've got a couple people around me that they've been very good coaches for me as a human being. And it's given me the opportunity to get to another level that I could never even imagine I could have gotten to. So I think if the right couple people that come together, it starts with the owner. And from the owner, there's always a couple people in leadership team that are just outstanding. And if they choose to be on that journey of being better at the human being level and getting a little deeper, their progress in running the company is exponential. Is that too deep?
I love your approach. No, it's great. I mean, look, if I think I look at you as like, I'm going to use a karate analogy, even though I don't do karate. Like, if I'm a black belt 1 stripe, you're like a 8 stripe black belt guy, right? So like, my kids asked me when they were real young, and probably now they're like, what do you, they like thought I was,
what do you do?
Kind of like a therapist, right? I'm kind of like one of Michigan's best unlicensed therapists.
Yeah.
Because I think that, and you're like at the top, like you Google search the Michigan, but I think there's this unspoken thing about entrepreneurs, which is kind of weird. Like, it's kind of lonely, right? Being a visionary or founder. And poor Chris Meso sold his company for a bunch of money. I feel really sorry for but I don't think a lot of people really understand like what goes on in visionaries' heads and the demands, the stress, the pressure, and like a million things are happening, right? Not to discount anybody else and what they do, because everybody has the same pressures, but the fact that you can now transfer that and help navigate somebody through that. But I love the fact that they have to sort of like recognize something, right? Like, what do you think that is, right? Because I'm able to look in the mirror a little bit and know my shortcomings, and not all of them, but I've had a dose of like, I have some people around me that will not be a yes man and tell me, which is great, but like, how does that visionary get in that mindset to be like ready or accept, to accept what you're talking about? Because going deep, some guys might be like, yeah, I'm out, right? Like, I just run a company, do my thing.
Yep.
I'm going to go to Burr Lake and drink and golf, and I'm great, right? I'm great.
That was me.
But what do you see in your experience as a coach and just your life experience on like when that can sort of change, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I got in front of a guy named John Bell. And so he's a neuroscience guy. And so I started working with him first as a third party. So he was working with clients of mine. And I discovered that these people who are much like me were coming back to me 3 months, 4 months, 5 months later with continuous conversations with John. And they were actually more humble and there's a lot more humanness to them. And our conversations were at a deeper level very quickly without any prodding on my part. And I had called John. I said, what is it that you're saying to these people? Because this person is like me, but this person is developing quicker than I am. So what's going on here? And so I went through that program with John. And so what you're asking is, do we really, not to get too deep in the woods, but what we're really talking to each other about is intrinsic value. And so on a human level, if you can understand how to take that thing that's been coddled and then built and then coddled and then built for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, called ego, and understand how that thing is weaponizing you as a person. And you can understand how to blow holes in it, not to kill it, but to make it less strong. And then, you're more open as a human being. And if you understand the human being, then you understand the ego is your human doing. But you need to understand and concentrate on the human being part of you, the open part of you that really is your base. It's not the golf clubs you belong to. It's not the cars you're driving. It's not the houses that you have. It has nothing to do with that drives your ego. Who are you as a person?
So again, I'm going to go back. You're the 8th stripe black belt, right? Chris Meso, 64, I think you said.
Yep.
How do you keep refueling yourself, right? You have T-Rex right on the business side. You're helping other entrepreneurs kind of grow through that journey. But what's the big change in you now that, because I'm sure you still like to go to Burr Lake and have a couple drinks and golf and all that and have fun, but like, how do you stay in this lane, right, that you're in now? Like, what do you have to do that?
Sure. That's a great question again. So I think that in the past, I've been doing this for about 8 years, the strategic coaching. I'll be going on my 9th year pretty soon. To be honest with you, Wes, I don't think I've worked any harder ever. I can't even think of me working as hard as I've worked this past 8 years in relearning and rereading. I mean, I can't believe how much I've been reading, just to understand what is it that I didn't understand before. And if I understand these concepts in business better, deeper, and I take that relationship as to what I used to think, how I used to execute on that, and what if I was to do it differently, and thought through that as well, I could actually explain it and teach it and coach it to others. And it's just, to me, it's where I belong. It's a good sweet spot.
No, that's great. So we're kind of coming up on some time. I could build out a whole series with you, Chris. I really appreciate the time and the knowledge. But if there's an entrepreneur listening to this or somebody, like what would be a next step with you, or like how do people get in contact with you? Because I think, somebody may listen to this and it might really pull at them and say, hey, like, I got to make a change, or, because again, I love your red run analogy, right? Like you just had this epiphany, right? Or I don't know if that's the right term, but you're like, I'm changing course, and not a lot of people do that, right? A lot of people just go through the motion, but how do, what's the easiest way for somebody to connect with you to maybe chat through some of this?
Yeah. So, I'm online. So there's, T-Rex, T-R-E-X, TREXadvisory.com. And there's a website, and you can, look through that and contact me, through the website if you want. What I would say, Wes, is that, these over the years, if I was to have known what I know today, and people, everybody can say this, but it is so amazing to me to understand in the context of business ownership. If I was to have known what I understand today, and if I was to implement these tools and concepts 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years prior to me leaving, I was so fortunate in life in how we exited our business. We would have crushed it by multiples more. And now I'm not talking just money, because I'm referring about money right now, but past money of understanding what I understand today about people and the humanness, I would have done a better job as my own person, and my family would have benefited more had I understand the total package that I'm trying to relay to clients today. I would have done a better job as a dad, as a husband, as well as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love that it's, it's like, is it the journey or the destination? And everybody's, trying to do this thing, but it's like, you can really kind of give hindsight on that journey. I think it's so invaluable. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time at your place. I know your time is very precious, but I really appreciate this experience share. So what's an email people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, C Meso, MESO at T-Rex Advisory, TREX Advisory.
Awesome. Well, I think I recommend like 7 things in my life. You're always one of them. I think you bring such a unique skill set and experience for entrepreneurs. So I hope if somebody's listening and they're kind of at that crossroad, they reach out to give some insight. But I really appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your time up north. I really appreciate it.
Wes, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you, my man. I mean, like always. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.